The next generation science standards in Dimension 1, Part 5 stress the necessity for students to be able to use mathematical and computational thinking. Now, unfortunately, just the word math tends to strike fear in the hearts of lots of students, and I guess computational probably does the same thing. And yet there's such beauty in mathematics, and it's useful for so many things that without it, science makes no sense. And so in this activity, you'll see how CSCS, by aggregating data and allowing students to do analysis of large group data, can really enhance the use of mathematical and computational thinking. Going to come from the field of biology. I think we'll look at heart rate and exercise. And in this particular activity, that students are asked to see how their heart rate recovers after an exercise. So they're asked to look at their heart rate at various different times. So you can see right here that they measure their resting pulse, and then they exercise for a couple minutes. They wait 10 seconds, and then over this 20-second period, they measure their pulse again, and then wait again, and so forth. And so they would take out a timer like this, set it up for 20 seconds, and then let the time start ticking, measure their pulse, and then they would enter their data into a form. And so we can see what their resting pulse was here, 10 seconds after exercise, and so forth. Now, again, most is terribly math, yet we're encouraging the students to analyze large sets. And so if you look at this right here, the form generates a spreadsheet where you can see not only the individual's data, as you would in a traditional lab, but you'll see all of their colleagues as well. So here you can see how the pulse changes over time for all the various students that participated in this activity. And then we can plot them up. And here we've plotted the average pulse rate, so calculating averages, and you have the students calculate it by hand if you wish, and then compare it with what's the values that are cranked out here. But anyway, they get the concept of basic statistics and means and so forth. And then they can compare it with their individuals, like here we have Senesac versus the average right there. Or we could look at a context, and you can see that some people have rates that are below average, other ones have rates that are above average, but that the red here indicates a relatively approximate average for the set that we're analyzing right here. And so again, once again, students get the idea that math is everywhere, even in biology where they oftentimes tend to avoid it. We look at statistical trends and patterns, and graphing the data here is using mathematical and computational thinking. In this CSCS activity, we demonstrate the use of mathematical and computational thinking in a little more sophisticated format. Here the students are asked to determine the wavelength of red, violet, and green laser light from laser pointers. And so they shine it through a diffraction grating, and when it goes through the grating, it leaves bright spots on the wall behind. It leaves them in a grid, and according to Snell's law, you can calculate what the wavelength is based upon the spread of the cells and the distance from the laser. And so as the students set up their activities, you can see the grid cast onto the graph paper there in the background. And they're going to be doing measurements of all of these distances here, the distances between the dots and the distances between the laser and the board, and then comparing the values that they get for the green, the violet, and the red laser. Then they input their data into a form which puts it out in this spreadsheet, and here you can see that these lab groups over here, given this diffraction grating, are getting this value for the wavelength of light, and here's the calculation for violet light. So when they summarize it, they see it like this, and this is just a graph of kind of what we know to be the case. And so if we look at it in this perspective right here, we say, oh, okay, we can see that violet light is longer wavelength than green. But then if somebody looks back at this and says, wait a minute, violet wavelength should be shorter than green. What could possibly have happened? Look like our values are pretty accurate. So when they scan back and look at the data, they can see this, and they're asking, okay, maybe somebody misreported their data. This one here seems spurious, to be sure. If we delete that point, as one student might suggest, we can then go back and graph it here and show that certainly that violet light is a shorter wavelength than green, as we can see just from the textbook and so forth. So the idea here is that they're using computational mathematical thinking to do the formulas to get the wavelengths, but then also to report their data in concert with others so that they can see patterns and then